Today we're going to be talking about different for purpose. Different for purpose. Now, ordinarily, I start with a specific Bible verse, but today I'm just going to talk about different characters in the Bible rather than a specific verse. And the one thing they seem to have in common, I particularly want to focus on Moses and on David. But also Abraham. I'll throw him in there a little bit too. And one thing that you notice about them is that they're different. They're different. And now we consider them different because they're great. You know, David had a heart after God's own heart. Abraham was a father of nations, and Moses was the great leader that led his people to freedom. So they're different than everybody else because now, instead of just different, we consider them special. So they're special, they're unique, and we attach all these good words to their differentness. But don't you know that's not how it started? Don't you know that at the beginning, they were just different? And different words were attached to their differentness, like weird, strange, nerdy, all the other words that people attach to others who don't think like them, who don't see the world like them, and they make it bad. And that's what happened to all of these people, which we now call great leaders. David, if you look at his story, when they came to anoint the king and Samuel told his father, bring all of your sons, because one of your sons I'm going to anoint, or bring all of your sons to this feast. And the father brought everyone but David. Can you imagine that? Samuel the prophet is throwing this big feast and says, bring all of your sons, and your dad brings everyone but you? He thinks you're so insignificant, strange, and unimportant. He doesn't even invite you? Imagine that. And then Moses was a Hebrew growing up in the Egyptian palace. So he was always the one out of place. He was always that guy who's not quite like us. You know, he was Hebrew, but his adopted mother was Egyptian. His adopted family was Egyptian. So he fit in, but quite not. And then when he tried to be among his own people, among the Hebrews said, like, who made you leader over us? So he didn't fit in there. So he's this kind of guy between two cultures. He doesn't quite fit in either one. And what about Abraham? He has to run out in the middle of the night to leave his family to go to a new land, you know? And he's someone, he brings his nephew with him. And his nephew, well, they just can't get along. So they eventually have to separate. They get too big to be together and they have to separate. And everywhere he goes, Abraham's kind of an outsider. Now, yeah, we now look at that as great. But when it was happening to them, I'm sure it didn't feel great. And that's where we get to our topic. Different for purpose. You see, David was the kind of guy that wrote poetry, played a harp, wasn't what some people would call a man's man, although he was a mighty warrior, but because of those aspects of him, people thought he was different. And Moses, he was skirting the line between two cultures. And Abraham, well, he had this dream, and he was going to be a nation unto himself, so he never fit in any nation. But that's exactly who they were supposed to be. That was exactly who they were supposed to be. You see, David the poet wrote most of Psalms that we now marvel at because that's who he was. Because he was a mighty warrior, but a man with a heart like God. He made one of the best kings Israel ever had. He was an artist and a warrior all in one. He was a lover and a strong man all in one. And this uniqueness made some people think he was strange, but it made him the perfect person for his calling. The perfect person for his calling. And Moses, straddling between two cultures, well, who else could go and tell Pharaoh to set his people free? Who else would understand both cultures enough to walk that line between them? Who else was a Hebrew loyal to the Hebrews but had learned all the secrets of the Egyptians? You see, that very identity crisis that had been a problem for Moses was the very thing that made him the perfect person for the job. And Abraham, this kind of not fitting in every nation or any nation, can you imagine? Would we have the Bible? Would we have the nation of Israel? Would we have who we are, the seed of Abraham, if Abraham had nicely fit into one nation or another and just blended in? Of course not. We would have none of that if he didn't stand out, if he didn't fit nowhere but everywhere. So I ask you, what about you? Is there something about you that maybe you don't quite fit in, or you see things a little bit differently than other people? Is it a source of pain, especially from childhood or your teenage years where everybody is trying desperately to fit in? Do you still carry some of those scars where you're kind of like, well, that's the thing people used to call me weird for, or that's the thing that the guys didn't like me for, or the girls didn't like me for, or people in general didn't like me for. And so you still have a little wounding from that differentness. Did you make the mistake of dulling down what made you different? Have you made the mistake of trying to fit in all the time? If you have, let me tell you, that's the wrong choice. You're different for purpose. Think about it. Think about anything in the world where there are 10,000 of the same, or 100,000 of the same, or 1,000,000 of the same. The more they're the same, the less valuable they are, right? So, a Q-tip. There's billions of Q-tips, and they're worth less than a penny. Why? Because they're reproducible. There's many of them. But think about something in the world where there's only one. That thing is priceless when there's only one. And that's you. There's only one of you. And every experience you have, every thought you have, every different creative way you are, the way your mind thinks that it's not like everybody else in the room, that is for a purpose. And yeah, it means sometimes people don't get you. Look at Jesus. The 12 disciples, the people who were with him all the time, 24/7, 90% of the time, they just didn't get him. Get used to it. It's normal. It is normal for people not to get you. That is normal, because if they got you, how could you ever lead out in front? The leader who's leading out in front is because the other people don't know where they're going. Your unique vision, your unique perspective, your unique talents is what allows you to stand out in front. And just like David, just like Moses, just like Abraham, just like Jesus, guess what? Eventually, other people will catch up. Eventually, they will catch up, or they won't. But you will finally be in a space where you realize that God has made you unique for a purpose, and you walk in it. And eventually, people will see that uniqueness as something special, as something valuable. And I got to tell you the truth, it might take longer than you want it to. But which is better? To be the full you, to be the you that God created you to be, to accomplish on earth what God brought you in this world to accomplish. For him at the end of your journey to say, job well done, good and faithful servant, or to spend the rest of your life trying to fit in, trying to be like someone else, and never walking in your true destiny. For my part, I think I'm okay with people not understanding me all the time. I think I'm okay with not everyone getting me. I think I'm okay with some people laughing at my ideas, because I know I am uniquely and wonderfully made for purpose, and so are you.